Hello, everybody. Welcome to Empowering Pastors. Hello, Brother Fuchsman. How are you this beautiful day?
If I was any better, I'd be twins.
If I was any better, boy, I don't know. I don't know if I'd want a twin. They'd get half of my birthday money. It would be good.
I know. No, you got to pay twice.
You got to pay twice.
I'll never have twins.
No, it's expensive. April's our expensive month. We have amazing amount of birthdays in April.
Yeah, money giving in April is like kind of.
Well, that's because we go to Brother Shuttlesworth's revival. That's what happens.
I meant here.
Okay, we want to welcome everybody on live stream, our YouTube Live. We want to welcome you. If this is your very first time, my name is Dr. Michael Spencer with Empowering Pastors, and we do a free leadership training every single Tuesday from noon to 1. And the reason it's free is because of investing, and we believe that investing in the leaders of the church as well as in the business world is a phenomenal opportunity to expand God's kingdom and to increase God's kingdom. And I believe that's important. You see, if you're a marketplace minister or a full-time minister, either way, we're investing in God's kingdom. And today, we just want to continue with what we started to do with training. I want to remind everybody there are notes up here available for you. Last week, we started with diversity. And we were talking about diversity within your organization. And I really only received, I think, 2 yeses for homework. And so I'm very excited. This has been a very lucrative day for me. So I just want to thank all of those who are investing into Empowering Pastors, actually just Michael Spencer. So we want to make sure that you get it to the right location. And you can send it to pastorspencer@gmail.com, which is my PayPal account, and that would be $25. Now, the reason I do that is because it takes me a while to get these trainings put together, and ultimately, it's just honor to be able to do the homework because I know that if you do it, it will build you, and so that's why I do it. Okay, so, and I'm not accepting any payments in Rand, which is South African money. I just want to let everybody know that I'm not putting that in. Okay. No, he gave me Rand the last time, and I can't use it. I'm not going to South Africa.
It's $25.
It's $25, but it's in the wrong currency. So, all right. So we're going to start with something. As I said, we're going to have a panel. I did talk to all the panelists, and they asked if we could move it to the 23rd. So we're going to have on the 23rd, we're going to have a phenomenal panel here of diversity. It's going to be really cool. We have the Jewish perspective. We're going to have poverty perspective. We're going to have an African-American perspective. We're going to have a wealthy perspective. We're going to have business perspective. We're going to have, I think we're going to have even a few subcultures. And so what I would like you to do is I would like you to write down questions on diversity that you might have to one of those people groups. And I think it's important. Why do we believe this is important? Number one, this is a topic that very few people are going to breach. It is a dangerous topic. It's a topic that most people don't like to chat about. But again, the need to chat about it is imperative because it's so easy for us individually to remain non-diverse. It's very easy for us to remain in our own cultures and our own people group, but that's not the plan of heaven. When the Tower of Babel happened, we know the diversity was instilled in a mass amount. And with that, the diversity, we need to bring it to where now, I love what Paul said, I've been reading Ephesians and Galatians lately, that he is that proclaimer that of the great mystery, and that is that the Gentiles too can be saved. Up to that point, I want to remind you, between the Jews and the Gentiles, they did not have discourse. In fact, the Samaritans were considered like dogs, and they weren't even considered real people. So diversity is powerful, and we want to make sure that that remains. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 22 is the verse that we started off using last week. When I am with those who are weak, I share their weaknesses, for I want to bring the weak to Christ. Yes, I try to find common ground. Everybody say common ground. With everyone doing everything. I want to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. Hi, Jay. Notes are there.
Hello, sir.
So last week when we started talking about diversity, we talked about how cross-cultural communication is imperative to become the bridge in our churches and our businesses. We have, in our area, I can only speak strongly for our area, we have, and what do I mean by that? I'm talking within the church world. We have white churches, we have African-American churches, and we have Latino churches. Very few Latino churches, but we do have a few Latino churches. And the diversity within them is minute. And that is never the plan of God. And in every business, the necessity of expanding into other cultures is important, especially the larger target or market that you're in. Why? Well, because diversity brings strength. Diversity is not weakness, it brings strength. What happens many times is, especially if you're in a place like ours where we live, where 93% of the people are Caucasian, it's very easy to have a village viewpoint rather than a world viewpoint. And the problem with that is the world viewpoint is the necessity to see that everybody, God loves everyone. He loves, we have a diversity group within our church that initially challenged me in a negative fashion, but I recognized that I had a level of prejudice. And that was, we had some folks come that were from the Middle East. And my initial thought was, they must be Muslim, just visiting. Honestly, it just showed a horrific value within my own life as I immediately tagged them as Muslim because of their orientation. And I had to say to myself, as I'm talking with them, they love Jesus. They're sold out to Jesus. They're doing ministry, and they're very, very intelligent people. And I had to readjust because we all have levels of prejudice within our life. Many times we don't even know it. Many times we're not even aware of them until we are facing them. And I believe that this is the necessity in the part. I was watching a movie last night, and it was a very interesting movie to me because it was very, very funny. Whatever, I'll just say it. Very, very funny. But it was an African-American couple. And they were in a multicultural community. And the father said, little Joey, I heard little Joey has a play date. Is there any people of color there? And it was an immediate like, whoa. But every single grouping have levels of prejudice. And we have got to address them, because without addressing them, then ultimately we actually disengage ourselves from the opportunity of really opening up more sales or more souls where people can be born again. So let's talk about culture. Culture is customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a nation, people, and other social groups. Samuel Chan describes it as culture is more like the air that you and I breathe. You cannot see it, usually don't pay attention to it, but it's either toxic and or healthy. And within each people group, there's specific culture with customs and with attitudes and expectations. Most of us will always remain within our own. One thing I found about with when we start communicating with diverse groups is that, especially when we start looking at what we perceive as a group, is the amount of subgroups that are within them. Even in our arena of life, we have, and I usually address it this way, and we'll be doing that with the panel in the next few weeks. We have Caucasian people in our area. Like I said, amount was 93%. But even within the Caucasian community, you have wealthy Caucasians, you have your middle-class Caucasians, and you have your poverty-stricken Caucasians. You have Caucasians that have been in this region for their entire life. And then you have transplants. And in each mindset, there's a different mindset within each of those groups. The interesting part is many of us just coagulate them all into one people group, and that's exactly how we expect them to think. By nature, we expect people to think exactly like we do. Yeah. By nature, we expect people to understand the language that we say. We had a young lady move into our house a few years back, and she started using words that I just had to stop and ask, what does that mean? I had no clue what some of these words meant, these phrases that she was using. She was not from our culture. She was from a poverty-stricken African-American family. And when she started talking, I looked at her and I just had no idea. Then my wife started using the phrases, and I just started making fun of my wife because she's definitely not in that people group. So, but here we are, we automatically look at people and assume that they're going to understand what we think. So today I want to talk about these groups. Now, some of this is a little repeat from last week because I just want to cover it, and then we're going to get into where we're going. Is everybody with me? Everybody have notes? We got some notes up here. If you're watching by live stream and you do not have notes, you did not get them by email, you need to email me your email. So you can send it to drspencer@empoweringpastors.com. You'll get the notes in your hand every single week. All right, what are some diverse groups? Immediately, we always think about race, and race is a small part of the diversity. We have economic groupings: poor, middle class, and wealthy. How many of you grew up here poor? Well, what's poor? Boy, that's a whole other grouping, isn't it? I'll tell you, my house, I grew up in a home where my dad bought the house for $6,000. And when they walked in, there was one room that we ended up making our dining room that was full of dog fecal matter. The people never let their dog out. The dog just crapped in the house, and they took a shovel and shoveled it out. Down in the basement, this house was 250 years old. In the basement, there were clothes stacked to the top of the ceiling that were all mold. When they were done wearing their clothes, I don't know how many times, but they just threw them in the basement. That was a dirt floor and a stone foundation, 250-year-old house in New England. So it was pretty gross. But I remember growing up as a child, I remember walking the plank. What does that mean? Well, if you've never been poor, you probably don't know. What that means is my father tore every floor out of the house. And we literally walked on planks from room to room to room. There was no heat upstairs, and so we would use a wood stove. In my bedroom, when you would get up in the wintertime, you would be able to reach over with your finger and write your name in the window pane because of all the frost. We did not grow up in a very wealthy home at all. But even that's relative. As I said, I was down in Mexico in Campeche with Pastor Patricio this last time, and I asked him to show us the poor portion of the city. It's a city of 1 million. And so he brought us up to the top of the mountain, and up there people were literally living in cardboard houses with framed up with, if they had tin, they had tin. So poverty is relative. We all think of people, wow, you know, when we think of poverty. How about middle class? How many of you grew up middle class? How many grew up wealthy? Raise your hand, Jay.
I was born in a house trailer.
He was born in a house trailer. You know what's amazing when I think about wealthy? Is even the prejudices within the wealthy. Pastor Andrea had a woman who came up to her who was extremely wealthy, old money from Elmira. And she said, it's amazing how many people are prejudiced against the wealthy people. She was talking about herself. And she said, it's amazing how people look at us and think that we're different than they are simply because we have money. She says, if we're sick, our money can't help us. We all know that because of Apple. Amen. She said, if I'm sick, it doesn't help me. I might be able to have better doctors, but if it's a sickness beyond what the doctors can do, she says, money doesn't make you less lonely.
Yeah.
She said, money really doesn't fix majority of the problems in our life. It just gives us a nicer house or a nicer car. She said, but it's amazing how people look at wealthy people and they're prejudiced against wealthy people because they feel they're untouchable. But what's even amazing within the wealthy people, within the wealth grouping, is that you have people that grew up in a trailer that became wealthy, and then you had people that ultimately gained old wealth and they stepped into wealth right from the beginning. Even that has different classes. You have gender groups, male and female. There are different. Can I say amen? They are different. Family groupings, race, multicultural. That means they marry the like race. They have multicultural families, which our family is multicultural. Jade is from South Africa, and my son he was born in Elmira. Big cultural differences. And then multiracial families, which is a big thing even in our age now, where multiracial marriages are seen as normal when 30 years ago they were seen as taboo. Then you have blended families. Divorce within the world rate's over 50%, and divorce within the church rate is over 50%. So how many of you, and listen, this no demeaning, how many of you came or have experienced divorce before? My family was divorced, not me, but my mom and dad were divorced. We're from a divorced family. And I have a stepfather. You've all met him. His name is Al. He's not my blood dad. I love my blood dad. I love my stepdad. That's a blended family. Then we have age groups. We have the millennialists that are 18 to 34, Gen X's, which is 35 to 50, baby boomers, which is 51 to 69, and then the silent generation, which is 70 to 87. What's that? You're thinking your dad is where in there? Your dad is a boomer. You be good to your father. Then you have thinking groups, which is the modernists and the postmodernists. And then you have racial groupings within America. The Asian Americans, the African Americans, the white American, the Native American, the Pacific American, the Hispanic or Latino American, the Island American, the Arab American, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. But the amazing part is each one have a different culture. Each one look at life through different glasses. And it's so much easier to remain within your own groupings. Activity groups. We've got bikers, we've got hunters, we've got sports, we've got cars, we've got knitting, we've got book clubs. I said book clubs because of Julia. We have book clubs, and we have men's groups, we have women's groups, we have AA, we have AAA. We have a lot of A's. All these activity groups are all diversities, and amazingly enough, even within the subgroups, there are subgroups. Now, I'll speak about a biker. You have motorcyclists, you have bikers that are middle to upper class bikers, and most of the motorcycles today, you have to have money to be able to be a biker because they cost so much money. So you're a biker, but then you have bikers that are patchers, and then you have a single patch group, which is what our group is, and they are just a group of people getting together to ride to have fun. And then you have two-piece patch groups, which are people trying to graduate to become one-percenter biker groups, which have to have permission and run through the right hoops to become the three-patch piece biker group, which is a one-percenter group. And then you get in one-percenter groups, and the one-percenter groups are diversified even in subculture to where you have your guys that are like hardcore, like an HA, or you have an AA one. I mean, even those are all subcultures. Our challenge and why we're talking about this is because there are so many cultures and subcultures, there's so much diversity, yet as individuals, the majority of the time in our lives, we stay in our comfortable zones. And this is one of the worst things that you can do when you're trying to gain followers as leaders. Now remember, as leaders, if you have nobody following you, you are just going for a walk. And the more followers you have, the greater leader you are, because you're able to have a greater following, which means you have more momentum, which means you have more influence. You know what they say is that if your church is not running 300, you have absolutely no influence in your community. The reason for that is because, number one, you don't have enough money. And number two, you don't have enough people voice. The more you have in your community, the more that you are leading means you have more influence and more opportunity to impact and leave a footprint. And we talked about that a few weeks ago about leaving a footprint. Every one of us should leave a legacy. And the legacy that we leave has to be a footprint within the community that you are doing, whether it's your company or whether it's your ministry, that you would be known when you die. If you actually need a tombstone when you die, it actually means you've left very little legacy. Shouldn't need one. If people forget your name, and let's be honest, most people forget somebody's name except for their intimate family. They forget who that person is within a very short period of time. In fact, I have to teach people that when I'm doing a funeral, if this person dies, I want to remind you to send letters to the family or encourage the family for the next year. Do you realize that most people don't even do that? Well, why? Well, because that person's now in the grave. It wasn't their intimate family. So now they've moved on to life. Every culture and subculture have the same design. They need two things. They need to be needed, and they need relationship. Do you want to know why kids go into gangs? They feel accepted. Why do people go to cults? Love and acceptance. Why are people around you? Well, that's a good question, isn't it? Why are people around you? They've got to be getting something that you are providing for them, because people don't just go and get, they have to receive as well. And every people group need to be needed, and they need to what? Need to be needed, and they need relationship. This is what they say about church. If a person comes to church and in 6 weeks they do not meet somebody, have some type of relationship, they're gone. Well, why is that? Because you can give somebody all they need, but without a relationship, there's no connection. You got to be a little bit louder than that.
I am going to be, but can I be a little
Absolutely.
whatever?
You need to come up front, though, to do that.
No, I'm not going to come up.
At least come up behind the thing so that
Okay,
we can hear.
so I don't want to be rebellious to you, so I'll just come up here.
You don't have to be rebellious.
I'm not. My name is Henry, not Josh.
Yeah, he's behind you. That's
Yeah, I
dangerous.
know. I'm having a little bit of a problem with the whole diversity thing. So I better do a little disclaimer.
Sure.
I'm going to do a little disclaimer so nobody thinks I'm some kind of a white racist. So I grew up part of my life, I was born in Poland, part of my life grew up in New York City. Can't get any more diversified than living in the East Side hood. My first and best friend was Terry Kershaw, a black kid that stood in front of a knife for me when we were walking through the park. So, you know, we're great friends. So, but I feel like you cannot force diversity. And so I don't think there's anything wrong if our area here is 93% white. If we got 93% of the church, or as much 100% of the church white, I don't think that's a major problem.
I don't think it's a problem either.
Okay, because I don't think you can't force diversity, and by human nature, by nature, you know, people, the Polacks hang out with the Polacks, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that or whatever. I think the harder somebody tries to force diversity, the worse it is. I've never seen where to force diversity. I think it's almost impossible. I think it's a natural thing, and the natural neutral mediator is Jesus.
Now, don't be teaching my stuff yet. We're
Not
almost
yet.
there.
Not yet.
We're almost
Okay.
there.
But I just think there's, especially in today's culture, there's so much about diversity that I've had diversity up to the, you know, where.
The reason I'm addressing it here is because in the church world, it's not addressed. And ultimately, like you're saying, if our air is 93% white, how many diversities are within the white? And there's a necessity not to force, but awareness, so that when you meet somebody, you'll know the language that you can chat with them. I've found that personally in our churches, we have every kind of background that you can imagine. We have, someone said to me the other day, you must have a very young church. I said, our oldest lady's 93. We have so many children, we have to open a new nursery. But in that whole range of individual, whether they be white, whether they be black, whether they be brown, or whether they be Asian, every one of them think differently. Now, in my pastor's church, if you were African American, you were not allowed to date somebody from the islands. They were totally opposed. With that, there's a need to know that. Because as a leader, if you stand up and you say something that is going to cause issue, well, now you have caused a breach that doesn't ultimately need to be created. So again,
But you caused a breach, lost 4
I
families,
did.
you told us last week, for just liking something.
exactly.
So that is also a part of human nature. You know, I mean, Jesus said, you know, blessed are they that are not offended. I mean, people can get offended at anything and everything. The key is having more of the Spirit of God in our lives so that we don't get offended.
Now you're cheating. You can't go to that side.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
But anyway.
You're absolutely right. And you're not being the devil's advocate. You're actually teaching the necessity of what we're talking about. because it's not that we can change anybody else, but we can change us. It's not that we can force anybody else, but when somebody feels loved, needed, and relationship, it breaches and goes across, it bridges every one of the diversities. So we're not doing a diversity training where we have to be careful of exactly how we talk, because there are people in this church especially that I've seen, you know, where it doesn't matter how politically correct you are, it does not matter. And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about you and I as leaders being able to lead more than just our comfort level people that we automatically are magnetized to because of our culture and our norm. The necessity is that we are willing, and that's a really powerful word, we are willing and at least aware enough that we can, in business, open up a whole new people group. In church, we can bring in a whole new people group, which adds people to the kingdom and which adds money for the kingdom. So the necessity to be aware is the number one process. For me, this is something that as a pastor, I have focused on intently, because I did not want a white church. I did not want a black church. I wanted I wanted the face of heaven to be here, which means I have island people here. Island people think totally different. In fact, African-American people that come from the South think different from the people that come from the West, think different than people who come from Elmira. And I've actually orientated myself to be around individuals and ask them specific questions that will help me understand how they think. So that way, as a leader, I'm not going to drive them away, but I'm going to draw them to. So I can have a stronger relationship with them, because not all people are strong. And it's easy to offend somebody if you're not wise. That's why Paul made that statement. If they're weak, I want to minister to their weakness. I want to identify where they are so I can be all things to all men to win all men. So absolutely, you're right on the target, and where we're heading here in the next few minutes is exactly where it has to be addressed. So thank you, honestly. Now, I'm going to ask you a quick question. In your business, because you do mainly sales, in your business, what is the strongest adversity that you have had with even your staff dealing with diversity?
We don't have any issues in diversity.
Why?
They're all white.
No, we don't. I can't speak for every one of our guys, but whether it's hiring or going, I don't care who my customers, as long as he pays the bills and we get a check. Who the heck cares, whether they're Korean or French, So diversity is not an issue. Our family is very diversified.
I'd like to add to what he just said.
Yes. A little bit louder, Brother Ken.
One thing I noticed when it comes to diversity in the workplace, all different races, all different economic backgrounds, the one thing that overrides that totally in the workplace is if they do a good job.
If they do a good job.
If they do a good job, 100% accepted by their peers, end of story.
So it doesn't matter.
Does not matter. They could be totally opposite ends of the spectrum of life.
Jay?
Totally agree with Ken. I was really
You
trying
need to be a little bit louder, please.
No, completely agree with Ken on that, because we do have a very mixed workforce, customer base. We seem to have some difficulty with the quote-unquote ethnic group of the redneck.
Redneck?
I was really trying to think if there was one we struggled with. And they seem to know more than we do, and we don't seem to do anything right for them. They can usually be judged by the amount of camouflage they're wearing, and the size of the skull in their mouth. Usually will set them apart.
It's a people group.
And that we do struggle with that group a little bit. That's tough. And we have a lot of those working for us, so we thought we could intermesh them, but they're tough sometimes.
It really, I think, as I've been studying this.
I partially fall into that group too, but yeah.
You're not wearing camo today. What I love about this study is it's made me look at me. And that's what I want to get into. The mindset of diversity is in every single one of us, to the extent we're willing to go. And that, truthfully, is where you cannot change an organization. You cannot impact an organization if you yourself aren't thinking in diversity. Now, it's not something you have to sit down and meditate on and bang your head on, but it is something you have to be aware of. Where I'm from, where I went to Bible, I'll just talk about where I went to Bible school. I went to Zion Bible Institute in Rhode Island, and it's mainly a Portuguese community. Now, at my Bible school, the year before I got there, the community itself at large is Portuguese, which has their own culture, which is very unique. But then there's an African-American community right nearby the school. And one day, there was a bunch of kids, African-American children, walking up through the school, through the sidewalks, and one of the Bible school students decided to push one of the children. And the kid ended up in the bushes. I don't think it was more than an hour. They said that there was 50 people with chains and bats waiting out in the streets to fight the Bible school students. Why? Well, because they disrespected a child within that community. Our goal in diversity thinking is, number one, and especially from my perspective as a pastor, is because I want to minister to all races. I want to minister to all the diversities. And if you'll notice, when we went through that diversity list, color was just a small portion of it. There's a need for every one of us not to offend the other people. Now, I'm not saying walking on eggshells. That's not what I'm saying at all, because, like I said, I lost 4 people by liking something that said Clinton was a liar. That's all I did. I liked it. I didn't even put it on my page. I just liked it. And we lost 4 African-American families. But I had to ask the African-American families why that was so offensive. And this is the answer I got. And as a Caucasian, it would never have crossed my mind. Their statement was, "We're afraid." And I said, I don't understand that. What are you afraid of? Why are you afraid of Trump? And they were very clear on some of the statements that he had made during his running and what he was even willing to do to the Spanish people by exile. All that put them in a fear. And therefore, that's one of the main reasons a lot of the African-Americans, and not just African-Americans, but also island people and also people of color, that they would not vote for Trump. In fact, they weren't just against Trump. They believed anybody that was for Trump was destroying the country. Now, what's amazing to me is you can have your own view, but that is their view.
But those aren't the facts.
It doesn't matter if it's the facts to you. It's the facts to them, because perception is everything. Now, it doesn't mean that you got to walk on eggshells, but at the same time, you don't run around trying to offend people. Like I said multiple times, there are people that should never be on Facebook. They're just dumb as stones. And I said that in the nicest way that could be said. You know, they offend people every time they strike a key. You know, and those type of people aren't there. Number one, they're not thinking beyond themselves. They're extremely selfish people. And they ultimately don't care about a soul if you're talking about the church world. And if they were the business world, well, let's just be real. If that restaurant that got focused on the news because of an employee might have destroyed that restaurant. It's amazing how powerful it is when we realize that our tongue is as the pen of a ready writer. And that what we do actually does impact other people. Whether they be the redneck group, or whether it be middle class group, or whether they live in the upper echelon of our community, financially, economically. Everybody is impacted. So the question is, as a leader, are we narrow-minded to just be focusing on the people that fit in our group?
No. So what was their response to when you said...
I can't hear you.
When they said they were scared of President Trump?
Yes?
What was your rebuttal to them?
There is no rebuttal. You can't rebuttal someone's mindset. It's not that at that moment, listen now, I've debated and I've been invited to Trump rallies and I've been invited to pray at Trump rallies. I choose not to. You heard me right from the pulpit. I will not do a political statement.
But their statement is they were in fear because of
They were.
Trump. It's not even a factual statement because it's not true.
But watch, Josh, and this is powerful because it doesn't matter if it's true. It's true to them. And that's where, as people, we've got to pay attention. You know, like I said, I stay away from the political realm because it's dangerous. I'm going to lose people. As a leader, I'm going to drive them away, not because of Christ. I'm going to drive them away because of an opinion. And you can't lead somebody on opinion.
What about in that situation? If they get a relationship with the Lord,
They all had a relationship with the Lord.
then this is my opinion. They should be driving closer to, away from Clintons because of their anti-biblical views that they have. That's my opinion. I mean, abortion. Just
And
put that on the
ultimately,
table and
that community was sharing with me that when you weighed the evils of that group and the evils of this group, the evils of this group were far outweighing the evils of this group. And you're not going to change their mind. But as a leader, is it your job to change their mind? As a leader, your job is to lead them.
But can that be said about you preaching?
Absolutely. But the gospel is offensive. And that's where, if I lose somebody because of the gospel, I'm good. If I lose somebody because I stand up and give my political views, that's not what Jesus told us to do.
But you could give your opinion about certain things that are brought into the political realm, and then they can make their own decision.
I choose to stay away because I'd rather them offended. The Bible says that the power of God is what? The gospel, not my opinion. Yes.
So what's your take on, in the business world, almost the first thing we're taught in any sales training, anything, is obviously stay away from politics and religion at all costs.
Absolutely.
No matter what.
A little bit louder, Brother Jay.
It's just a struggle that we deal with because I've had people try to preach from our counter.
Yes.
And I feel awful guilty stopping that, but I also, from a business standpoint, like, we do need to appeal to all. It's a tough struggle that we deal with.
It is a tough struggle, but at the same time, you have your core value. And your core value drives your destination. And with that, you've got to stay close to such. For me, I know I'm going to offend people with the gospel. You know, when I stand up there and preach that certain principles, we've had literally people get up and walk out. Well, I can't change those principles because that's the word of God. And that's the business that we're in, is the word of God. But if I stand up there and give my opinion and people get up and walk out, then have I done the vision? I haven't done the vision. So diversity for me is huge. I'm dealing right now with over 20 people groups within our church. And each one of them think differently.
Wait a minute. So going back to their statement.
You need to be a little bit loud. They can't hear
Going
you.
back to their statement, their opinion was they were scared because President Trump was a racist, right?
Yes.
And you didn't want to share your opinion back to them because you didn't want them.
I'm not going to change them.
So, but can't you give them the facts and say the facts are
No.
he employs?
No.
They're going to look at that as being argumentative. And like,
No, you need to understand. She's a person of color.
But the facts is that his closest people.
It doesn't
are
matter.
From
Josh, it doesn't matter. Josh, it does not matter. And this is important.
it more matters like what news stations they're listening to and like what's really like appealing to their feelings. It, like, you know, like how different news stations either sway Democratic or Republican.
Sure.
Whichever ones they were listening to or whichever ones they were getting their facts from were probably just all against Trump. So they might not know the facts. And that's just what it is.
And more often than
You
that,
can't
if
just argue with them.
if they already have an opinion,
There was no argument. The argument is that the facts show that President Trump's administration is multicultural and he employs thousands of people.
It doesn't matter.
Those are the facts.
Josh, it doesn't really matter. And so we're just going to move on because it really doesn't matter. It honestly doesn't matter. Because as a leader, I mean, if you're going to focus on these things, then the only people you're going to have within your organization are Republicans. Well, what if you find a Democrat who is a phenomenal worker? What if you find a person that hates Republicans and hates Democrats and smokes weed? You know, ultimately, you're after workers that are going to be able to build your company so you can build the kingdom. And you're not going to say, are you a Republican or a Democrat? As a leader, you're going to lead both of them. As a leader, I lead both of them here. As a pastor, I'm not going to change someone's personal views, but their personal views are not my responsibility. My responsibility is to give them the gospel of Christ because that's my call. So as a pastor, I have to stand up there on a Sunday morning and look at all of those cultures and be able to convey a message across cross-cultural communication to where I'm going to be able to hit as many people as possible and gain as many followers as possible, because ultimately, what is my job as a pastor? My job is a shepherd. As a shepherd, you have to have sheep. If you have no sheep, then you have no flock. If you have no flock, then you're not a shepherd. The larger your flock, the more you have to move them, the more you're going to have sheep with black feet, the more you're going to have sheep with white eyes, the more you're going to have sheep with pink eyes, not with pink eye, but pink eyes, the more you're going to have sheep with a little dot of brown on their ear. I mean, you do not sit back and diversify who you like and who you don't like because of that diversity. You've got to be able to lead them all. That's where I'm going. Where you lead your company has direct impact on your personal viewpoints on diversity. And this is something we don't always think about, but today we're going to challenge you a little bit, and I want you to be able to evaluate yourself a little bit. Is that fair? Now, our personal circles reflect our true reception of diversity. Our circles are normally filled with people that we're comfortable with and individuals that have similar mindsets and activities. Pentecostals hang out with Pentecostals. Baptists hang out with Baptists. Non-church folk hang out with non-church folk. Very rarely are you going to have somebody who's a sold-out, born-again Christian going to be accepted into a group of non-Christians. Why? Because they're out partying, drinking, craziness, and these Pentecostals go, well, you know, I'm really not going to do that. There's no assimilation. So we studied this before about tribes. Everybody say tribes. Tribes are powerful because I was talking to Manny a little bit earlier, and he said, "You mean not?" When I said the word tribes, he says, "You mean cliques?" And I said, absolutely. There are always going to be cliques. And everybody says, well, I hate cliques. Well, you can't hate cliques. You're part of one. Everybody's part of a clique. Everyone's part of a tribe. Tribes are a major part of your diversity and my diversity and our acceptance of or rejection of other people. Because tribes are powerful. Tribes are humans. It says it like this. Human beings can't help it. We need to belong. One of the most powerful of our survival mechanisms is to be part of a tribe, to contribute to and take from a group of like-minded people. All humans need those two things, love and acceptance. We want to belong. So where you find those two elements is where you belong. It's where you seem to fit in. It's where you're more and easily accepted. It's where you have less constriction against your own belief system and less constriction against your personality even. You know, I know folks that love me and they'll hang out with me simply because of my personality. But there's always a relationship there. I've had people that have come to this church and they said this to me, Pastor, you preach the best word in this entire region. There's no one who preaches the word of God like you preach the word of God. There's nobody that's being straight up like you're straight up. And Pastor, you preach, it's always God's will to hear you preach the entire covenant. And that's just not preacher. I thank you, and that's why I'm here. Well, then they're gone. Well, I asked them, where'd you go? Well, I just didn't connect to anybody. They were looking for a tribe. And no matter what I preach, how good you preach, that's not going to get them into the tribe. They have to have a relationship. Love and acceptance is imperative for every single human being. We need that. And that is where the personal diversity comes into effect, because we either allow people to be part of our lives or we don't allow them to be part of our lives. We either have them and give them the love and acceptance that they need, and we do. Every one of us have a circle of people that we're around. We have a circle of influence that we're around personally, and that's what I want to chat about a little bit today. I want you to look at your circles. That's your life. Every one of us should have the same. And this is what Brother Henry was talking about earlier. The stronger Jesus is as the center of your life, the more inclusive you're going to be. I'm not talking inclusive with sin. I'm talking inclusive with people. Because the one thing that you had about Jesus that was the most powerful is that he loved people. He loved every kind of people. Do you remember the woman who came up in the book of Matthew chapter 15, came up and her daughter was demon possessed? Jesus, my daughter is severely demon possessed. And Jesus ignored her. That wasn't nice. Then she kept nagging, and the disciples said, Jesus, Jesus simply said this, I've been sent to the tribe of Israel. Well, she was a Canaanite. It wasn't right for him to talk with her. It wasn't right for him to be around her. He was sent for the children of Israel. And this is what she said. Jesus, but even the little dogs get to eat off the table, get to eat the crumbs from the table. And Jesus stopped. There was a shift in his heart and his mind. In fact, what was so powerful is this woman pulled him from this dispensation, this is where he was in Israel, to way past his resurrection, where it was now going to be the great mystery where the Gentiles would have opportunity for salvation. This woman, with her passion, with her want, with her need, Jesus stepped out and gave her the acceptance that wasn't even pliable until after his resurrection. Why? Because he loves people. How about the woman at the well? I've shared this before. The woman at the well in Samaria, what happened? Jesus walked up, the disciples went into town to get food, and this woman came out to get water, and he said, woman, give me water. She says, well, you know what, I'm a little shocked. I'm a woman, number one, and number two, I'm a Samaritan, and you're talking to me? And then Jesus turns and starts sharing her life. You know, you're living with a guy right now, and he's not your husband, you've had 5 husbands, and now the man you're living with isn't your husband. And boom, he just brings revelation, and this woman declares him to be the prophet, the Son of God, the Messiah. And she runs into town, she tells all of her friends, and Jesus brings great revival to the city. He broke every cultural rule. He broke every political rule. He broke every rule there was. Jesus was showing us, teaching us, that diversity is a mandate and a majority, and a mandatory for you and I to be able to reach other people beyond our own groupings that we like to hang out. He was hanging out with his 12. How many out of the 12 was he the closest to? 3. So even within the 12, he had his 3. But then beyond the 12, he had his 70. So there are groupings that are within our lives. But what Christ was showing us is this diversity factor is so important, because without it, we are going to leave whole people groups. If Jesus had looked at the Samaritan woman and said, I got nothing, I got no time for you, you're a woman, don't talk to me, get away from me, what would happen to the city of Samaria? Well, if you're a business person, if you aren't willing to talk to people outside of your people group, then what's going to happen to all that money that's sitting in their pockets? They're going to spend it somewhere. It's important that we understand. Number 2. Excuse me. It didn't transfer over in my notes. Is family. Now, with multiracial and multicultural marriages, we're starting to see diversity now within families that we had not seen before. I shared last week about how I was brought up, and how I was brought up in Massachusetts in a little hometown church, is that you did not date, marry, or anybody of a different race or culture. It was against the rule of God. That's what I was taught. I didn't even realize that was a lie until I went to Bible school. Moses married an Ethiopian woman. Moses was Israelite. He was olive-skinned, and I've never seen anybody that's not very dark who's an Ethiopian. Multicultural, multiracial. But then also, man, it's so important to recognize that within our families, now we're seeing racial diversity. We're seeing cultural diversity. In ours, it's country diversity. You know, daughter-in-law is from South Africa. It is a completely different culture. Yeah. And then you have friends. Here we go. I heard that. Or muttered it. Here we go. This is where every one of us, this is what I want you to do. I want you to take your pen and I want you to mark on the circle where you have diversity in these groups. So in your family, what diversities do you have? Now, I'm not talking just race. Everyone's mind immediately goes to race. I'm talking cultural diversities. What cultural diversities? Like Brother Henry said, he was from Poland. He grew up in New York City. If you ever heard his testimony, it is a phenomenal testimony about how powerful woman his ma is. But that's a whole different culture. Where do you see cultural diversity within your life? Because as you as an individual, as a business owner, or even as in the ministry, if you have no personal cultural diversity, then why do you actually think it's going to happen within the place that you're, I want to say running, the place that you're leading in? I remember Brother Ted, I went up to Brother Ted one time and I said, why don't people dance in our church? He says, do you? I said, nope. He goes, then they won't either. He said, where the leader goes, the people go. And if you yourself aren't one of diversity, you're staying segregated in your own mindset, then why do you think your organization is going to go that direction? Well, listen, if you're not going to go that direction to where you're going to be willing to be wise enough as a leader to lead individuals, whether it be by need or relationship and or both to retain, then you've got to question how much you're losing financially and also numerically within your church. I think I shared this 2 weeks ago. We had a couple come to the church. They were a multiracial couple. And their children were just beautiful. I remember them walking into the church the very first time. And this is what they said. We would just like to know if we're accepted here. And I went, I don't know what you mean. They said, well, we went to the African American church. They said, we went to the black church and we were unaccepted there. We went to another white church and we were not accepted there. I need to know if our family is going to be accepted here.
You said, hey, my son married an African.
That's right. Actually, at that point, you know what really touched my life was Bible school, because there was every single nation represented. I'm talking like the guy who bunked next to us was from Africa. One day I walked into the bathroom and he was washing his face in the toilet. And I said, hey, what you doing? He goes, well, I had to wash my face. And I says, wrong basin. He didn't know. He didn't know. I mean, this is the issue that we have, is that we've got to ask ourselves, how confined are we in our thinking? Are we cultural? Have we been around other cultures enough to know that our way is not the only way? Are we at least aware how to minister to somebody? Do you realize, I remember when I was in Bible school, we had, it was called personal evangelism class. And this teacher, this guest speaker came, this lady, and she stood up in front of our entire class and she said, quote unquote, you are all, I gotta say, is it Semitis or anti-Semitis? When you don't like
Anti-Semitic.
Anti-Semitic. You're anti-Semitist. And I said, what's that? She said, you all hate Jews. And I went, I don't know any Jews. Wait a minute. My neighbor was a Jew. That's right, Steve was a Jew. That's what I said. I said, we love Steve. I didn't know I was anti-Semitic. Yeah, you're all. It's like, how could you even think? I would never. She says, you minister to Jews by telling them you need the cross of Jesus. She says the cross is offensive to the Jew. And I went, what? It's amazing. This is where you and I have to just be aware. You know, there are certain words, certain things. I remember when I was on the road, I was in New York City, and I was doing ministry in the Bronx. And I stood up and I said, don't be a scumbag. The congregation stopped. That was done. Well, where I'm from, scumbag means you're a lowlife. But scumbag to them meant something totally different. It was very, very, very bad. Well, I lost the whole congregation. Well, why? I wasn't wise. I remember going to Canada, and I said, I need a napkin. Doesn't mean the same. Yeah, napkin is a female hygienic disposable unit. Yes. Yeah. It was very uncomfortable. Watch, it's all learning. It's all diversifying. What I'm trying to do here is this, is I'm not telling, and as Brother Henry brought, I'm not telling you that you have to walk around on eggshells and being afraid to offend people, but we do have to be aware. We do have to be aware because there are people that are not going to heaven, and there are people as businesses you want in your company. You want more customers. Hello? You want more customers. You want more influx of finances. You know, if you're wise, you don't want to constrain yourself to one vein. You want to open up to the whole artery. Why? Because there's more blood flow in the artery than there is in a capillary. And all of that opens up opportunities. And many of us, we don't stay in there. So here we go. I'm going to ask some questions. What is the uniqueness, and we're talking about our family, what is the uniqueness of the person that is represented by your dot? I mean, you have somebody unique in your family, right? I didn't say because they're on antidepressant drugs or anything. That's not what I'm asking about. My daughter-in-law. Okay, here we go. South African. Somebody else. What's the diversity that was within that dot?
American.
American. Okay.
I have a lot of family that are Catholicism.
Yeah.
How about like alcoholism and lesbians and things of that nature?
So we'll just
that's diverse, right?
diverse. That's diverse. Bad stuff. It encompasses a lot. Come on, somebody else. What's the dot in your family? Islander. Now, honestly, is that a big difference?
In our family?
Yeah.
Well.
How many of you, was it easy when you first brought the Islander to your family?
In my family, yes.
It was normal?
Yeah.
Was it difficult with any other portion?
Yes. Like because we were a military family, so in different parts of the country, it was challenging.
Okay, very good. Somebody else.
I got Cajuns in my family.
Are you okay?
I'm not kidding. I got everything. I just don't want to name them all.
I'm not sure if I can spell Cajun right. Come on, tell me now.
C-U-N.
What?
J-U-N.
Would farming, like farming?
Sure. Why is that different?
Agriculture. Because it's like the Hicks, are like that. So, I mean, farming is a whole separate people group.
It is. And again, all I'm trying to do is get you thinking. Because we all have levels of diversity within our own families. We all have people that are like, whoa. And when they first were brought into your family, some people might have said, whoa. Now, I remember, and again, I'm sharing some things with you. And that is, I got 1 minute, so here we go. I remember my sister started dating in New England. They're called mulattoes, which is African American and Caucasian. And so I remember she brought this young man home. And my mom and my dad smiled a lot and shook his hand and sat him down and fed him. But when he left, they told my sister, you will break up with him immediately. I tell you, there was some stress in the family that day. The diversity. How many diverse people do you have in your family? How about your friends? How many of you have people in your friendship? I'm talking your real friendships that are diverse. Yeah? Give me their diversities.
Indian.
Okay?
White.
Faith and religion again.
Faith. What?
Politics.
Okay?
There's always Josh, you know, he just.
Josh. We'll just write Josh.
Age.
Age.
Compassionate.
She's
serious.
No, she's very serious.
Rural versus urban.
Okay? All of these are diversities. My question to you is, and why I want you to do this, is I want you to see how actually open you are to diversity within your relationships. Associates are easy. We all know people from different cultures, from different natures. And those are the ones that are less touching you. These are the ones, the associates are the ones that are less impactful to you. That are the ones that are going to less make you think, well, really, if they disappear tomorrow, it's no big deal. But your friends, your family, these are the folks that you have to ask yourself a real quick question. And that is, am I a person of diversity? Am I a person that just constrains my lifestyle to be around people that I like, that are more like me? Now, I have to do this all the time. I really do. I have to do this all the time. And I ask a lot of questions. And the reason we're going to have a panel in 2 weeks is because we have a Jewish guy coming. We have an African-American coming who's going to give us a viewpoint on poverty between the white poverty group and the African-American poverty group. We have an African-American coming that's going to be from not from the area. We have an African-American coming that's from the area. We're going to have a white individual there that's poor. I'm going to bring in a bunch of diversity, and we're going to ask them questions. And we're going to ask them never to be offended. I won't have them here if they would be. But there's a need for that because many of us have never asked questions. Yes?
There's a question online.
Okay.
How do you create unity when your leadership is so diverse? Are you intentional, and do you have a blueprint, or is there specific training that you went through? Or
I think that number one priority of every church, if you're going to have a diverse church, you have to have diversity within your staff. If you have no diversity within your staff, it's very difficult. And this was explained to me from the diversity. They said, if you have no diversity, then you cannot stand up on the pulpit and say that you are a diverse church. It's not even shown in your leadership. If it's not shown in your leadership, then what you actually believe is what you actually hire. Yes?
They do the same thing with like police departments. They try to like match it up with like who lives
In the
area.
vicinities?
Yeah, because they don't want like a large black population to only have white cops because
Yeah.
interactive.
Well, Manny's Latino. And his culture is completely different. Totally different from ours. Do you know that? Do you know how he thinks? Do you know how he interacts?
I think one of the biggest issues is.
You need to be a little bit louder, honey. It's only
I think
jumping
one of
one
the
bar.
biggest issues is that just being from somebody who comes from a lot of different backgrounds, I think if you feel nervous about reaching out to different people, I know on our leadership team, when we first got a bunch of like different kinds of people into the youth group, the biggest thing was I have no idea how to connect to these kids. I don't know what to do. And the simple thing is anybody from a different culture or a different race or whatever, you don't really have to be nervous because it doesn't matter really what's going on the outside or even their culture. All they want to do is be treated like a person. I don't want to be treated like a black woman. I want to be treated like a woman. I don't want to treat Cody like a white guy, like a bunch of the kids think that they need to treat him like, or I'm sure kids, like the little kids here treat Pastor Spencer like the rich white guy. He just wants to be looked at. Yeah, he just wants to be looked at as a man. And if you just come up to somebody, oh, they're a man, they're a woman, it's a lot easier to interact with people. So I used to feel nervous about interacting with different groups too, but it's just love and acceptance. It just comes down
Love
to
and
that.
acceptance.
You don't have to try and go up to somebody from the hood and give them dap. Like, stop doing that.
Yeah.
Just treat them like the person that they are.
And at the same time, understanding culture, I walked up to a gentleman from Guam, and I gave him a hug. And he says, don't do that.
Yeah.
He said, we bump.
Yeah, it's all about obviously learning culture, and most people are understanding, but there's no fear. Just treat them like a person.
Love you, Brother Henry. I know you got a bug. Here we go. I'm going to end with this. Your understanding of inclusion as a company even, and even as a church, because we do TV commercials. My question is, if someone watches our TV commercial or someone walks into this church, are they going to feel welcome? Are they going to feel wanting to be part of? Are they going to feel that culturally they can walk in here and be designed and be desired? How about the commercials that I run? How about the things that we speak? Can I go cross-cultural even with my language across every barrier? And I've done advertising that has been very bad for us. My favorite one was, if you're hurt, if you're wounded, if you just need Jesus because you're broken down, just call 607-739-5196. I got every call from every poor person asking us to pay all their bills. I reached not one person that was even middle class. So every bit of advertising, every bit of activity that you do that's public, you have to look at it as, am I cross-cultural communication, or am I just simply reaching one people group, the ones that I'm comfortable with? So there's a woman in Florida where Minister Redder has his house. He lives in a gated community. And in that gated community, we ride motorcycles. So we come up and we're all leathered out and everything like this. And we ride up to the gate and she will not even open the slider. She just peers. And she goes, she's never looked at our identification. Why? She won't come up from under the slider. Because for whatever reason, at some point in time, she had a bad experience with a biker, had to be.
So you guys calling there on BMWs would get a different response.
We would get her on a BMW, but listen, that's a BMW, and that's a whole other people group. Okay, so let's move on. This is so powerful because honestly, I'm just concerned that with our personal inclusions or exclusions, we're not opening ourselves up to love people, minister to people, and let's talk to the businesses, make more money. How can you do it? And if you personally have no diversity in your life, then let's be honest. Either you've never been aware of it, or you really don't care about it. And not that you can make someone like you, but most people will like you if you like them. But most people won't go to somebody that's not like them because it's uncomfortable for them. Be willing to cross lines. I have to do it all the time. Let me tell you, it is fun because you get to learn something. You get to learn that your way isn't always the best way. You get to learn that you think completely different from somebody else. I'm flabbergasted with some of the things that people think. I can't understand it. But you know what? It doesn't matter if I understand it. That's how they think. And I've got to be willing to love them even if I don't agree with them. Questions? I know this is a hot topic. I know this is one that not everybody agrees with. I know it doesn't apply to every situation. But I'll tell you, if you never think about it, then I'll guarantee your personal diversity, you might not have any dots in here. And no dots, that really should show something about yourself. And it's not an overwhelmingly positive thing. It means you're a very closed person. Very closed. Okay? Questions? No? Thank you.
I got one.
Yes.
I'm not trying to.
You just be a little bit louder. Okay?
I'm not trying to be the subject up before, but I keep going back to one of the reasons why people would vote. There was two people to vote for in the election. I really don't even talk about it. I talk to my friends.
A little bit, you're covering your mouth a bit. So, I need you to come up. Come on. At least come behind it so that people can hear you online.
In front of you or behind you?
Right there. That's good.
So there were two candidates for the election. And as a pastor, or even when that situation, the specific situation, couldn't you at least, that's not your opinion, the fact was most Christians who are God-fearing Christians can vote based on, okay, this person actually prays, seems somewhat semi-religious, and the other person was anti-God and having nothing to do with God. Why can't that come up in a conversation?
For me, what happens is this.
But that's not even your opinion. That's the fact that.
But I know this
the
is
President
that
Trump is
I've
actually
learned
getting counsel.
One of the most powerful things that we learned. How many of you remember Goldsmith's teaching on what got you here won't get you there? The 20 great mistakes of leaders.
I'm not trying to argue.
No, you're not arguing. I think it's a great topic. And one of the number one things that destroys your leadership is your opinion. Your opinions don't matter. They matter to you, but they don't matter to somebody else. And this is, again, why we hang around people that we like, that destroy diversity.
But that was an opinion. The fact of the matter that President Trump was actually, that's not an opinion, that he actually was praying with Ben Carson every single day, whereas Hillary Clinton was anti-God.
At the same time, their opinion was, we've got a man that's going to cast a lot of our country out, throw them out, destroy families.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a man who is speaking a lot like Hitler spoke when he was speaking. You can like it or not, but this is their viewpoint. And so do we take on some of these moral issues, or do we take on a man who can destroy our country? And whether you're right or they're right, the issue is that their mindset is their right and your mindset that is right. Proof really doesn't matter when somebody's already made up their mind. Right. And so for a business person, your job is to sell
signs.
You sell signs, you sell t-shirts, you sell, what else you do?
Sell me.
Sell you, and you sell you. If you walked up into, let's just say, a multicultural situation, and you saw Clinton's thing on their car, and you walked up and you said, listen, I want to sell you signs, but I think you're stupid for voting for Clinton. Are they buying from you? Are they buying from you? Are they buying? No, they're not buying from you. I'll answer that for you. They're not buying from you. And the reason is because that's your opinion. But if you stay to your vision, you stay focused on your vision, you can lead many cultures with great diversity. And that's ultimately your design. Because your design is to build your company to be a multi-million-dollar corporation. Which means you're going to have Muslims come for signs. Mm-hmm. Which means you're going to have Buddhists come for signs. Mm-hmm. Which means you're going to have homosexuals come for signs. Which means you're going to come from all diversities. You're going to have women come for signs. Men come for signs. All ethnicities. You know, this is what I'm saying, is that if you stay to your vision, then you can minister to a large amount of diversity without destruction. It's when we start planting our opinions that we eliminate people from our circle. I know it's a horrible challenge, but in the church world, I have to live this because I want the face of heaven here. I want every kind of person to come into this building. And that means I have to be wise in how I communicate cross-culturally. I'm not changing their culture. I'm not changing their culture. The Romanians, I had a church take communion. They brought over all these Romanian people. They invested tens of thousands of dollars in these Romanian people. And they did communion. And the folks, they refused to take communion. And they were asked why. And they said, because you people don't respect God. And they said, what do you mean you don't respect God? They said, well, you're supposed to fast a whole day before you take communion. They lost a whole group of Ukrainians because an evangelist said, you've got to stand on the word of God. He took the Bible, laid it on the floor, and stood on it. They got up, whole community got up and left. Why? Because in their culture, at that point, they couldn't even have a Bible. They were actually tearing a piece out and passing it around to the community because that was the only Bible they were going to get. How dare you disrespect the Bible by standing on it? Culture. It affects everything. So with Jay's store, if he starts putting up swastikas,
might gain some customers.
You might gain a few, but you'll probably lose more than you gain.
They get some free advertising.
Free advertising, all right. But this is where we've got to be wise. And this is why this topic, I decided to breach it. It'd be easier to stay away from it. But as leaders, we don't have the right to ignore this one. Because our goal is to gain followers, no matter what culture they're from. Thank you.
Ready, Anna?
Go over and hit that red button.
Okay, I have to confirm with one.